Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Karishma Konnect. Speaking with me in this episode is Pierre Carnet, Managing Director of Massive Music MENA, which is a leading award-winning sonic identity and music company that elevates brand positioning through sound and has helped so many different brands around the world to engage better with their audiences, all through the power of sound. Now, he speaks to me about setting up this global company regionally at such a young age. What were the kind of challenges and opportunities he went through? How you can navigate them if you're going through a similar journey? Why music is so important for brands? Why they must invest in it to bridge that emotional connection with their consumers and a whole lot more. So go check out the episode. And until the next one, stay tuned. This is Karishma. I'll be back yet again. Until then, tada. Thank you so much, Pierre, for joining me on this episode of Karishma Connect. It's a massive pleasure to have you on this platform and podcast. Thank you for making time again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And pleased to meet you and excited to be here.
Thank you. The first question I begin with, Pierre, on this podcast is tell me about your journey so far, because nobody will say it like you do, and I don't even want to try to do so because I'm sure you would say it the best way possible. Please dive right in.
Okay, sure. So I guess I start with from the beginning and give you a little bit of background about myself and who I am. So my name is Pierre. I'm 29 years old. I'm originally from France, but I'm someone who's lived abroad pretty much my entire life since I was a child, all across Europe and Asia, a little bit of North America. And I've always been passionate about the arts and specifically entertainment, pop culture, music. I actually have a background as a musician, specifically as a beat maker for hip hop artists. This is something that most people can't tell when they see me today because very much on the business side and living in Dubai and everything. But I spent a couple of years in France back in the day, producing beats for rappers, being a hip hop DJ, this kind of thing. And that really opened me up to the world of music and music production. And while I was doing this, I also, as a teenager and then a young adult, started studying business and started studying marketing, which is something that has always very much fascinated me as well. I'm very interested in how communication works, how people communicate, and how we can use craft and art to help communicate with each other, whether that's on the day-to-day or more in a sort of business and marketing sense. And I was lucky enough very early on in my career after my studies to find a very specific niche to work in, which combines actually both of these passion, which is working in the space of music for brands and for entertainment, which is something that I started doing in Paris, in France, where I'm from, working in an advertising agency, basically directing all of the music for the advertising agency. I think I got extremely lucky, to be honest. I think it's quite rare to be able to find jobs which really correspond to your passion and have a lot of potential for growth as well. The space that I work in is a niche, but it is a big niche. There's a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, a lot of advertising and brands out there that need good music, that need good sound to be able to tell their story, give off the right emotions, give off the right message, basically. And so this is something that I basically fell in love with and have been doing my entire career. So initially starting in France, working in advertising agencies, and freelancing as a music consultant, working in advertising, branding, but also a little bit in film and television. I worked on a Netflix show back in those days, a couple of feature films, as well as a music supervisor, which is an amazing job, which I would recommend to anyone who's passionate about music.
Tell me more about it.
Basically, a music supervisor is someone who's paid to know as much music as possible, and to work with film directors, marketeers, producers, and so on, to help them identify and purchase or license the right piece of music for films, television shows, events. I even worked on some fashion shows back in the day, and of course, advertising and branding, which is a space that I'm still in to this day. Um, and so after kind of building that experience, I joined a company called Massive Music, which is based in Amsterdam, which is the world's leading music agency for brands. So Massive Music operates specifically in the brand space, working on music for advertising, stores, events, shows, and also a specialization which is audio branding, creating those kind of like little memorable pieces of sound that a lot of people might identify. People might think of like the Netflix sound, for example, the Tudum. A famous one that we worked on at Massive Music is the sound of TikTok, which you hear all over the place now, all over the world. That sort of do 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 that little jingle that you hear everywhere. And so this was a big step for me, joining Massive Music in their home base in Amsterdam, which at the time is a global agency with 9 offices around the world in those days. And after spending a couple of years there and spending quite a bit of time kind of traveling the world and exploring the different needs in music for brands all around the world, I together with my colleagues, identified that there was a real requirement for the work that we do in the Middle East, specifically because there's a lot of brands and cultural initiatives happening in this part of the world since quite a few years, which are very new, which are very ambitious, and which require good quality and a smart use of music. So after identifying this, seeing also the opportunity for me and for us as a business to participate in the cultural growth of the region as much as we can with the expertise that we have from doing this kind of work in the US and in Europe. Um, we decided to send me over to Dubai to open up shop here. And so I came with my suitcases and my experience in working with brand music, and set up Massive Music here in Dubai, which works across the region, across the MENA region, with brands to supply them with music, but also in the film and entertainment space, because outside of the brand space, as you know, people who watch might know, there's a lot happening in this part of the world in terms of cultural and entertainment developments. A lot of investment and ambition being put into movies, into television, producing local shows, and really radiating the local culture as much as possible, not only across the region but around the world. And so this is something that we really wanted to participate in and support as much as we could, and that for me personally was a very exciting and an interesting challenge. And so, yeah, I moved over here about 2 years ago and started our local branch, Massive Music Dubai, which has in the meantime grown to be a bigger operation with a full team, an office, a recording studio, everything that we need out here. And we've been working on creating the sounds and music for some of the biggest brands and some of the most popular films in the region ever since. And it's been a absolutely fantastic, exciting, rewarding journey, though of course also quite difficult. Building a business is tough. It's a very competitive landscape out here, so quite an adventure, which we're still very much in the middle of. But so far has been just a fantastic experience for me and also for my team, actually.
That sounds exciting. And I would like to digress a little bit into what you just mentioned, that it's starting up by yourself in any particular country is one thing, but then to bring in an established business and then again build it from scratch is another. What was your process like? What were the challenges, the opportunities, and how did you navigate them?
Absolutely. So in terms of the opportunities, I think I've mentioned a little bit already in the introduction. We whether it's myself personally, who's been working in music for brands entertainment for quite a few years now, or Massive Music as a business, which is one of the, if not the global leader in this space. We have a lot of experience and a lot of expertise in creating high quality, strategic, and of course well crafted and artistic music for content and brands. Um, and what we see here and have seen in the region, which is something that I think is really unique to this part of the world, is absolutely incredible development of brands, projects, entertainment at a really incredible pace and with a lot of ambition, um, which requires that expertise when it comes to music. Historically, there have been some hubs for music and entertainment in the region, more in sort of North Africa, Egypt, Lebanon. Um, but these days, whether it's in the UAE, whether it's in Saudi Arabia, whether it's in Qatar or other countries in the region, there is huge ambition in terms of becoming cultural hubs, actually, and really sort of having um, that level and that representation in the world of entertainment, which maybe was a little bit less seen before. And so for us, this is a fantastic opportunity, not only as a business, but also just culturally, like I think for me, like what's really important in the work I do is we get to be the intermediary between the music industry and the world of production and brands. And so we get to actually help artists and musicians develop their craft, build their careers in music, and build sustainable careers. And at the end of the day, help develop that industry through a different vector than just selling albums and doing shows, and a vector which is often quite underestimated or not recognized. There's a lot of
Especially
opportunity
in the
for
region,
it.
I believe.
Definitely, there's still a lot to do. I would argue there's a lot of infrastructure for the music industry that's still very much being built at the moment in the region, whether that's in terms of, not to get into too much detail, but in terms of things like copyright law and royalties, music venues, and even just sort of the environment being really um, friendly and pushing towards having more of a music industry and more opportunity for artists. And so, a big part of our ambition outside of working with big brands and big projects and putting out great work is also to help support that industry and support the individuals and help people build careers in music. So this is all something that for me is very important and very exciting and represents a huge opportunity to make a difference, I would say. But this exact same opportunity is also the biggest challenge, which is that there's definitely a lot of work to do in terms of infrastructure and also the education and understanding of the music industry, how people value artists and their time and their craft, how people understand the time it takes to produce music, how much it costs to produce music or to use music. How does it work if I want to use a famous song by, let's say, Rihanna in a commercial? What is the process, and how much money do I need to put into this? These things are still very much misunderstood, and for us, have been big challenges coming from markets where we have much more mature industries, whether it's in terms of cinema, branding and advertising, or the music itself. So a lot of the work that we do and that I do in the region is very much also around promotion of the value and the importance of music, and education around the processes, the mechanics, and the more sort of boring, I would say, kind of contractual paperwork, legal side of music, which is extremely important at the end of the day, because when we're talking about art, art is something that is intangible for the most part. Obviously, if you print music on a CD, you're selling an album, but at the end of the day, the intrinsic value of that music lies in the piece and the intellectual property of that piece, and that's something that's still not often understood by some of the brands and some of the film producers that we work with in the region, which is absolutely fine. I'm not at all trying to sort of criticize or complain, but it's definitely something that is still very much in development, and that for us is a challenge because we come in having to basically explain how to work through these processes, how to budget for things appropriately, how to make sure that artists are being respected in their time, remunerated properly, and leveraged in a way that's smart and respectful by the people who need them. So this is something that we have been working a lot on and still are very much on a daily basis.
And then all that success that you have achieved has now led you to be on the Cannes jury. Tell me something about that, and tell me about what do you think that means for the region? How did it all lead up to here?
Sure, yeah. So maybe just for anyone who's not familiar, Cannes Lions is the world's leading festival of creativity, which is quite a broad term, but that refers a lot to the advertising and branding space. There's the Cannes Lions, there's the Cannes Film Festival, excuse me, and then there's the Cannes Lions Festival Creativity, which is more focused on the advertising space. And it is the biggest event in the world for people who work in this industry, where every year the most successful campaigns and projects and activations in the brand space are rewarded and recognized alongside all kinds of networking events, conferences, thought leadership, and so on. I had the honor of being selected as part of the jury of that festival this year. So basically, being tasked with awarding some of the best work in the world in branding and advertising, which is usually something that you only do once in your career.
Huge honor,
And
especially at the
thank
stage of career that you're at. Like, I mean, huge congratulations to you on that.
Thank you. Yes, it's very flattering and very proud moment for me, for sure. And especially because I, I was representing not only Massive Music, not only myself, but also the region, and making a space for the Middle East on that roster of jury members. Now, I'm not the only person there. We also had a number of representatives, I believe about 20 or 25 people in total coming from the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and so on. However, I was the only person to be chosen to be part of this who comes from a music agency or any kind of music company from the region. And so beyond being a great honor and also an interesting experience and challenge for me, this was, to me and to us, I think, a great recognition of the fact that we are putting the music industry on the map in the region, and having that recognition not only on a regional scale, but also on a global scale. People are paying attention to the work that we're doing and seeing, well, oh, there is a very high level of craft and creativity that is coming out of the UAE, that is coming out of the Middle East, and that deserves to be recognized in the biggest event of the year for the global creative community. So this was something that's very special to me, and I went through the jurying a couple of weeks ago, mid of June, and it was a fantastic experience. Looking from work all over the world and basically getting to judge how good the music is, which is something that I love doing. So absolutely a great moment. Yeah.
Any insights that you can share from that experience for potential listeners?
So I would say there's still room to grow when it comes to projects from the Middle East. We have representation there. There are projects there that won big and people who are well recognized, but there's still a lot of room for us to be more represented and to have more work be in those competitions. And I see that happening every year. We have better representation from the Middle East at this event. We have more work that wins awards, and in the day-to-day work that we're seeing here, we're seeing people always push the boundaries of creativity and craft even further. On the more nerdy side, a lot of work with AI starting to come out. A lot of work using AI to create music and to create singers' voices and this kind of thing, which is something that's completely new and that's also really interesting and challenging for our space, because obviously, the question mark around how is AI going to affect creatives, musicians, but also other kinds of artists, right? Photographers, painters, graphic designers in the future is a big question mark, and we're starting to see those changes sort of come into effect, or at least in the form of kind of experimentations, which is something that was really interesting to see.
We are also in a world where everyone has a platform, really, right? You have if you're a musician, you have a platform right on your phone to become famous, upload your music. Gone are the days when one would have to struggle to put their music out there. How do you, in such a scenario, with all the legacy that you've built already and would continue to, how do you stay true to your core? How do you stay relevant and do what you do in a way that's still authentic and unique?
It's a good question. Uh, so in the work that I'm doing is very much, of course, building a business and driving effectiveness and sort of high quality craft for the people and the clients that I work with. Um, I think what's really important is to always remember where you came from and why you actually got into this industry. And for me, this has been always two things, which is firstly my passion for music and good music, and
Yeah.
wanting people to be exposed to good music. One of the ways that I describe what we do at Massive Music is we make the world sound better. We try to help people be surrounded by quality sound, by quality, interesting, inspiring music, and this is something to always keep in mind. Um, and I think, secondly, it's about really trying to keep an understanding of the value and the motivations and ambitions of the artists and the creatives that we work with. A big part of what we do in the region, as part of kind of the development and education work that we do, is making sure that artists are being accurately represented, are being correctly paid, are being correctly contracted for the work that they do, whether it's for film or television or for brand work. Because at the end of the day, yes, we might work a lot with advertising or commercial projects, but also, whether it's myself or us as a business, it's really important that we are giving back to the industry and the community that we come from. And the way I see it, musicians are, and artists as a whole, to be honest, are an absolutely essential part of how we
Absolutely.
work as a society, who we are as human beings. I wouldn't want to live in a world without arts and without entertainment, and I wouldn't want to live in a world with art and entertainment that's only being mass produced and produced through science rather than sort of inspiration and a true human touch. I think there's room for both, but I wouldn't want to have only that. And I think a key element of maintaining that is making sure that the talent that you're working with is respected and is being treated correctly. And this is something that I will always try to drive in our work. So this would be my number one recommendation for artists, which is um, play to your strengths and play to your culture. Just because something is working somewhere else in the world doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you, and possibly might even mean that you're going to do it less well than other people are doing it. Whereas actually you could be flourishing and performing much better by doing your own thing. So this is my feedback to some artists. If any of them are listening, I'm sure they'll recognize who they are. When it comes to people who are looking to get more into the business side of the music industry, my advice will always be think big and think flexible in terms of what the music industry means. Because a lot of people basically think there's just like two or three jobs in the music industry. You can be an artist manager, project manager, own a
Yeah.
label, maybe, a couple of basic sort of jobs that everyone knows, right? Maybe an A&R for people who know who that is, what that is. But at the end of the day, it's a huge ecosystem with a lot of diversity. There are designers that work in the music industry. There are lawyers that work in music. There's people like myself that do more sort of production and consultative work for brands and for film and television. There's all kinds of different roles that exist that people often don't think about. And instead, we're all competing to do the same one or two things, which they think sound exciting. And so my advice is always like be open-minded in terms of how you approach the industry, and also play to your strengths. If you have experience in marketing, join a label and work on marketing for the label. Do some releases. If you went to law school, we have very few music lawyers in this part of the world, and they're very much needed to draft good contracts that will protect artists and their music. And so there's a lot of different spaces to grow if you're able to play to your strengths and be open-minded. And what's interesting is that because it is a creative industry, there is a lot of room for sort of horizontal and diagonal evolution. You might start out as a lawyer, but after a couple of years, you built your network in the music industry, you've met some artists, you met some people who work in labels, and you might have an opportunity to transition to be that project manager or artistic director or whatever it is that you initially wanted to do. And so I think, for a lot of people, I would say keep it open. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of demand. Every music company in the region is hiring at the moment and looking for talent across all kinds of different specialties. And so, be flexible, try some new things, play to your strengths, and work your way in. And once you're in, then there's actually a whole even bigger world of things that you have access to and that you can do.
When you're producing music for any sort of brand, it's very different from producing music for, say, a film or a full-fledged song that you have lasting for like a bunch of minutes, whereas a brand is literally, like you said, it's literally a split second. How do you manage to navigate the creative process of engineering that sound really? Like, where do you find your inspiration from? I know I might be getting into the technicalities of it, and I hope it sounds as relevant, but just from an insight perspective.
Of course, the approach is not necessarily that different, actually, because let's say we're working on like music for a commercial. These can be 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minute commercials, which is not necessarily much longer than a scene would be in a film, for example. If you're soundtracking a scene in a film, you might have a 5-minute scene, but you might also just have a 30-second scene. So the duration of things is not that different. However, what's different is the objective and the people that you work with. When we work in film and television, we're working with directors and film producers. When we work in the brand space, we're working with brand teams, advertising teams, marketing agencies who have different objectives. A lot of commercials will have the objective of increasing brand awareness, developing sort of the linkage and the appreciation of a product, maybe getting a specific message across. Film and television is mostly about storytelling and really accompanying that story to the best of your ability with music and sound. This being said, the challenges that we come up with, going back to your question about the creative process, are quite similar in the sense that it's music, and so it's very subjective. Everyone has their own taste in music. Everyone has things that they like, and everyone has things that they don't like. And this is something that we professionally have to navigate on a day-to-day basis, which is manage people's subjective expectations, which always requires a lot of creative exploration, a lot of experimentation until we land on the right track, the right composition that everyone is going to be aligned with. When we're working in the brand space, we have an advantage in this, which is that we can remove some of that subjectivity by looking at data and strategy. What is the audience of this brand? What are they looking to achieve? We can even do things like testing. We can do like focus groups and studies to figure out which piece of music gives the right emotion compared to another. So we can infuse a lot of data, whereas when we're in the film and TV space, it's going to be a lot more just focused on the feeling and the creative of the director, because also that's what people are looking for, right? When you go see a movie in the cinema, you're looking to really enter the vision and the world of that director and of that film, and really get into that personal experience. Whereas brands tend to have more sort of direct objectives, which we can then link to data and strategy. So not so different in the execution, but for sure quite different in terms of the creative approach that we might take in that work.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that insight. I'm going to ask you my last two questions. One is, why do you think, in a nutshell, why is that emotional connect so important, especially when you're producing music for brands?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe, and my opinion is backed up by a fair amount of sort of data and research as well, that music and sound is one of the most powerful tools to build emotional connections with people. You can bond over a song. You can build memories around music. You know, everyone has that song where if you listen to it, it brings you back to like a specific moment in your life. You can help people connect, right, over music. Like I've been in situations where we don't necessarily speak the same language as a person, but like we can share a moment around a piece of music or around a live performance of a show. And you know, instinctively as human beings, an emotional relationship to sound is something that's really like baked into our DNA from the beginning. We react to sounds in ways that are actually quite scientific, where our brains are trained over, you know, centuries and millennia to identify different pieces of information in sound. Where yes, there will be cultural differences, but at the end of the day, most people will be able to identify a sad song compared to a happy song in quite similar ways, right? And so when we work in the brand space, that emotional connection and building those memories and building those bonds is something that we will always look to leverage. It can actually be quite a strategic process around, well, what is the story that we're trying to tell around this brand, and how are we going to use music to give sort of the little bits and pieces of information that people are going to be maybe not even consciously receptive to, but even in a subconscious way that they're going to react to make them laugh, to make them smile, maybe to make them cry, or to make them really excited. We can really influence people's behaviors in the choice of music and the way that we create music. And you know, of course, when we're working to film, we can even completely change the message of a piece of content based on the music that we choose. There's a demonstration that I do quite often when I'm doing presentations and talks, where I'll take the same scene from a film and play the original song and then a different song. So let's say it's a happy scene with a happy piece of music, and then we play it also with a sad piece of music. And you can completely transform the story that's being told with exactly the same film and exactly the same images, right? And so our job is to do that, but in a much more nuanced way, to be able to control the narrative and control the messaging that's being given off by the music that's being used.
Interesting, very interesting. I'm going to go back to the wins and ask you about your win at the Transform Awards. And also, just, of course, tell me more about that. And then also tell me what's next in your journey of making sound better.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a slightly different space to what we've been talking to for the most part, which is that we do a lot of work in branding. Now, what we've been talking about mostly so far in this conversation is film, television, entertainment, and sort of advertising and content. Branding is a slightly different space, and branding is about how do we use sound to build long-term, memorable connections to brands for their audience. So a good way to think about it is to think about audio logos, right? I mentioned like Netflix, TikTok, and those little sort of bits and pieces of sound that basically represent an entire brand in the space of like 2 to 3 seconds. And the way that we approach this exercise is, yes, we'll make those little logos, we call them sonic logos, but actually we look at the wider ecosystem of sound. So, we look at, well, how is the brand using music in all of its contents? And what's the story and what's the message and what's kind of the mood that's being given off there? Let's say it's a brand that has an app or that has products that have sound in them. Most people don't think about this stuff, right? And so, how do we make sure that it's connected, but also that it's functional? So, the sounds in your application, are they helping you to interact with the application by telling you when there's an error, when there's notification, when an action needs to be taken? Let's say we think about stores. How is the music that plays in the background going to affect your mood in the store? How long you stay? How happy your employees are who are spending the entire day there listening to your playlists. No one wants to be working a 10-hour shifts, 8-hour shifts in a store and listening to the same playlist every single day of the year. It's horrible. It'll drive people crazy. And so this is what we're talking about when we're looking at branding, which is how do we create a consistent experience for brands, and how do we create memorable assets that are really going to build value and recognition for them over time. And the awards that you were referring to are the Transform Awards, which are basically the world's leading branding awards, not specifically in sound. They also recognize the overall branding work. So they have awards for visual branding, logos, fonts, colors, this kind of thing, brand platforms, all of this. And this year we were very happy to win the top 2 awards in the audio branding category for the Middle East for the second time in a row. We also got the top 2 last year. It's been a good 2 years. For our work creating the sonic branding of Careem, which is a brand that I think everyone in Dubai will be familiar with, as well as a company called AROYA Cruises, which is a new company that's being launched in Saudi Arabia right now, which will be the first fully owned Saudi and Middle Eastern cruise line. And so when we work, for example, for the cruise line, we look at the audio logo, the music for their content, but we also think about what's the music that people hear when they board the ship, and how do we make sure that it's welcoming and giving them the right experience? What are the sounds when there's announcements happening in the ship? What are the playlists within the different restaurants and the different activities within the ship, and so on? So we're really looking at creating that whole experience. So yeah, both of these projects were rewarded, which we're very happy with, and right now we're doing a lot of other work in this space, especially for brands.
Just because it's a brand. Can you tell me something about the process behind Careem? Because that's a brand that I think most would be familiar with as well.
Yes, and so this is actually a really interesting story. I'll try to keep it short because these are long processes that take months of strategy and exploration and music production. But the Careem team came to us with a really interesting challenge, which is the brand platform of Careem is they are the everything app, right? You can go on Careem, you can order food, you can order groceries, you can get a ride, you can get a bicycle, you can transfer money, you can do all of these different things, right? And so they said, we want you to create the sound of everything, which is quite a big sort of challenge to work with, and especially if you want to do it in a way that's not going to be total chaos, basically, right? Because initially what you'll do is you'll explore ideas of can we take sounds from the bikes and from the world of money and from the world of travel and kind of bring all those things together and build a story around that, but it just becomes completely chaotic. And the idea and the interpretation that we came up with is, well, yes, Careem is the everything app, but at the end of the day, what do they do? Primarily they make access to everything easy and simple. And so it's an app that basically has the objective of simplifying your life and simplifying access to these services. And so we flipped that idea of the sound of everything into, let's create the sound of simplicity, which is a much easier and more logical brief to approach when it comes to music and sound, right? And so there we started looking at, well, let's create something that, in terms of its structure and in terms of the sound we use, sounds very modern, sounds very sort of hyper-produced, much like the app. It's very modern, forward-thinking app and brand, but really has that kind of element of simplicity at its core. And beyond that, creating something that's modulable so that down the line, and it's something that we've started working on now, we can actually take that music and bring it into the app and bring it into the different services of Careem in a way that makes sense and that's simple and that's connected. And so the music was created with an idea in mind of, we're going to create a piece of music where you can actually take it apart and you'll end up with all of these different individual elements, which are also recognizable, are simple, but still connected to the core brand and the sound of Careem. So really interesting sort of creative and strategic process, and that's still being rolled out and developed at the moment. People have only seen a few bits and pieces at the moment because it was launched at the beginning of this year, if I remember correctly. So there's still a lot that's going to be coming in that space.
But it's so rare, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface after the entire interview, because it's so
Yes.
rare to even recognize that the sound would have had so much of background behind it. Like you rightfully said in the beginning of the interview, that I'm myself stunned, and there's so much that one doesn't know about in the field. And rightfully said, I mean, it's a whole different industry altogether.
Of course, there's a lot to do. Absolutely.
What are you most looking forward to? That would be my last question to you.
Right now, taking a bit of holiday next month. That's the main thing I would say. I'm going to be taking a couple of weeks to cycle around Europe with my friend, with one of my best friends there. So just taking a break from the hustle and bustle, but in a wider scope, I think, going back to what I was saying at the beginning of our conversation, what I'm really excited about is just seeing the development of the music industry in the region, here in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, across the region. There's so much to do. There's so much potential. There's so much talent and ambition, and I think, every month there are new things happening. There are new surprises. There are new opportunities, and new good music coming out. And just seeing that evolution is just something that I'm super excited about, and of course want to continue to participate in as much as I can and as we can with my team over here.
A massive power right back to you. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much, Pierre, for joining me once again. It's been a pleasure and it's been really insightful. Thank you for widening the horizons for me. I'm sure people will have a good time listening in as well.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for some great questions and for having me. And yeah, keep an eye out. There's a lot to come.
Absolutely, will do.
Knock, knock. Are you still here? Well, I'm super happy that you are. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in. Please do like, share, and subscribe to Karishma Konnect across platforms. And I look forward to bringing you many more such amazing stories from around the world. If you've got one, please do get in touch. Lots of love.